teach you this in school. They didn't whisper it to you in moments of doubt. And the world certainly won't hand it to you wrapped in comfort and applause. Because this truth, this shift, isn't designed for everyone. It's not found in books they recommend on morning shows. It's not preached in places obsessed with fitting in. And it's not discovered by people who only want to feel good. This is the path for those who can no longer lie to themselves. Because true wealth, the kind that transforms lives and outlives generations, doesn't begin in your bank account. It begins in the furnace of your mind. Before the world ever sees it, before the numbers show up, before the results can be measured or admired. It begins with a simple, unsettling realization. I can't keep living like this. That's when the old world starts to fall apart. Not because it was taken from you, but because you outgrew it. You stopped tolerating conversations that lead nowhere. You stopped participating in rituals that numb you. You stop wasting your most valuable resources, your energy, your time, your soul, on things that serve no purpose. And in that space, in that brutal clarity, something new is born. Not overnight, not loudly, but with quiet fire. A new standard, a new identity, a new rhythm that no longer chases the shallow highs of temporary relief, but begins to pursue something far greater. Alignment. Not the kind that's marketed, the kind that's felt, the kind that builds from the inside out. Because real wealth doesn't arrive like a prize. It grows like a tree, rooted in discipline, clarity, and purpose. And once that seed is planted in you, once you start to wake up with new thoughts, higher questions, stronger boundaries, the world around you will feel different. The distractions will lose their grip. The noise will seem louder, but less important. The crowd will seem busier, but going nowhere. And you'll begin to build. You'll begin to walk like someone who knows, deep down, that nothing external can ever define you again. You won't need approval. You won't need noise. You won't need to be seen. Because once you feel this shift, once you start living by it, once you realize that wealth is something you become long before it ever shows up in your results, everything else becomes noise. So if you've been feeling restless, if the things that once satisfied you now feel hollow, if you've grown disgusted with mediocrity, allergic to distraction, and drawn toward solitude, clarity, and depth, you're not broken. You're being forged. And what comes next isn't reserved for the lucky. It's earned by the ones willing to strip away every false layer and rebuild themselves from the inside out. This isn't just a guide. It's a mirror. A map back to the version of you that was never meant to play small. Let's talk about the signs, not of luck, but of transformation. Not of wealth in the world's eyes, but of the kind of wealth that begins in silence and ends in legacy. Let's begin. Lesson 1. Discomfort with mediocrity is the first sign of wealth. It starts quietly, not with celebration, not with clarity, but with discontent. A low hum of restlessness you can't shake. A tightening in your chest when you go through the motions. A growing sense that the life you've been living no longer fits. You're not broken. You're not lost. You're not failing. You're waking up. And that awakening doesn't arrive with applause. It arrives with discomfort. Because the first sign that you're on the path to real wealth, true, enduring, internal wealth, is this. Mediocrity starts to feel unbearable. Not because someone told you to aim higher, Not because a self-help book inspired you, but because your spirit, your deeper intelligence, has decided that enough is enough. What once felt normal now feels like prison. The job you tolerated, the endless small talk, the same conversations, the same habits, the same patterns. They don't numb you anymore. They agitate you. This isn't frustration. It's not burnout. It's not a phase. It's rejection. Your identity is rejecting anything that no longer aligns with who you're becoming. And make no mistake, this is sacred. It's not a mood. It's not a mood swing. It's a signal. A signal that the version of you that once accepted less has reached its expiration date. A signal that the future version of you, the one that builds, creates, contributes, and leads, has started to take control. And now, that new voice within you is screaming louder than ever. This is not who I am anymore. Those 6 words mark the beginning of transformation. They break the spell. They dissolve excuses. They kill the lie that fitting in equals success. You stop tolerating environments that drain you. You stop indulging in routines that numb you. You stop laughing at jokes that silence your soul. Because the illusion of comfort can no longer pacify the fire building inside you. This is the real shift. You become more silent, but more certain. You stop needing validation, but your standards skyrocket. You no longer chase attention, but your presence begins to demand it. You begin to crave structure. You seek depth over distraction. You stop wasting time, energy, and emotion on what doesn't grow you. You feel it, don't you? The subtle disgust with settling. The quiet defiance when someone tells you to just be realistic. The inner conviction that you're not meant to be average, no matter how convincing the world's expectations may seem. And it's not about ego. It's not about proving anything. It's about alignment. Alignment with the truth that you were never designed to be a passive consumer of life. You were meant to be a builder, a force, a creator. So when you feel this discomfort with mediocrity, understand what it is. It's not weakness. It's not being ungrateful. It's the first undeniable sign that your wealth, mental, emotional, spiritual, and yes, financial, is beginning to awaken from within. Because real wealth doesn't begin with a bank account. It begins with a line in the sand. It begins with that moment where you look around and finally admit, this version of my life is too small for the person I'm becoming. That sentence changes everything. From that point on, you stop chasing what looks good and start building what feels true. You stop asking for permission and start demanding progress. You no longer move out of desperation. You move with intention. This is not a motivational moment. This is your origin story. And the discomfort you feel, that's your soul stretching, your potential expanding, your old limits collapsing under the weight of your new standard. So honor the discomfort. Don't numb it. Don't silence it. Don't wish it away. Let it burn. Let it push you to move differently. Think deeper. Speak with more clarity. And live with more precision. Because discomfort with mediocrity is not a problem. It's the first sign of life. The first spark of fire. And those who follow that fire, instead of running from it, are the ones who end up becoming the people they were always meant to be. Lesson 2. You've developed an intolerance for wasted time. There comes a moment in every awakened life when time stops feeling like a blur and starts feeling like currency. Not the kind you spend without thinking, but the kind you invest with precision, because now you understand you never get it back. And once you've seen time for what it really is, not a clock, not a calendar, not a system to keep schedules, but a sacred resource. Everything changes. Where once you tolerated distractions, now they make your skin crawl. Where once you filled empty hours with noise and novelty, now it leaves you feeling hollow. You can no longer unsee the truth. Most people are wasting their lives 1 second at a time, and you refuse to be one of them. This is not burnout. This is not you being cold or distant. This is clarity. This is what happens when your internal compass locks onto something greater. Because now, you're no longer available for conversations that lead nowhere. You're no longer giving your energy to chaos masquerading as fun. You're no longer amused by wasting hours chasing a feeling you can't even name. You've crossed a threshold, one that few ever reach, where time is no longer a tool for escaping the moment, but a weapon for building the future. This is the pivot. Most people trade their time for comfort. They sell it cheap, scrolling, binge-watching, overextending, saying yes to everyone except themselves. They live for weekends, then complain when Monday hits like a wall. But you're not running from Monday anymore. You're building for decades. You've learned that a single hour of alignment is worth more than a year of wishful thinking. That one focused morning is more valuable than an entire weekend lost in numbing routines. You've learned that every yes must now be earned. That every minute you protect is a vote for the person you're becoming. This doesn't mean you never rest, but it does mean that even your rest has purpose now. You recharge because your vision demands strength. You pause not to escape, but to prepare. This is what it means to respect time. And once you do, you start to see how rare it is. You become hyper-aware of how easily people give away the most precious resource they have, and how little they have to show for it. You start saying no, not to reject, but to refine. No to people who don't value your focus. No to opportunities that pull you off mission. No to urgency that isn't yours. Because every time you say no to distraction, you say yes to destiny. And let's be clear, this shift won't make you more popular, but it will make you powerful. Because the world follows the focused. The universe responds to those who know where they're going. And the life you want will never hand itself over to someone who treats time like it's infinite. You are becoming the exception. Where others chase feelings, you build systems. Where others burn energy, you bank it into long-term momentum. Where others live reactively, you lead proactively. That's the difference. You no longer fill your day with tasks to feel busy. You engineer it around outcomes that matter. You rise with purpose, not panic. You move with rhythm, not rush. You build with intention, not impulse. And that internal discipline, that sacred urgency, that is the birth of wealth consciousness. Because when you realize time is wealth, and that attention is its most powerful expression, you no longer beg for abundance. You start creating it. So if you felt this shift lately, if you're waking up earlier, working in silence, cutting back the noise, if your calendar is tighter, your hours more sacred, your distractions more costly, you're not just getting more productive, you're getting more powerful. Because you're no longer living for the moment. You're building for a life that will outlive the moment. A legacy. And legacies are built by those who refuse to waste what can never be reclaimed. Time. Lesson 3. You are learning to master your focus. In a world built to divide your mind, focus is no longer a luxury. It's a revolution. If you're feeling the pull to eliminate distractions, if you're beginning to crave silence over stimulation, if you're tired of being spread thin by 1,000 meaningless notifications and endless obligations, you're not overwhelmed. You're awakening. Because the moment you start protecting your focus, you stop being a passenger in your life. You step into the driver's seat. You become deliberate. You become dangerous. Focus is more than concentration. It's the blueprint of creation. And once you start mastering it, the world begins to shift around you. You start to notice how fractured everything has become. How most people are trapped in loops of mental noise, scrolling, reacting, comparing, chasing. They call it life. But it's not life. It's a slow death by distraction. But you're pulling away from all that now. Not because someone told you to. Not because you're trying to impress anyone. But because your soul is getting louder than the noise. You're beginning to realize that not everything deserves your attention. That not every conversation is worth having. That not every app, update, or crisis needs your emotional investment. And this isn't arrogance. This is alignment. The more focused you become, the more you realize how expensive distraction really is. Every scattered thought is a detour from your destiny. Every time you give your energy to something that doesn't grow you, you shrink. That's the cost. And when you start to feel that cost, when it becomes intolerable to waste time, to engage in mental clutter, to drift from your purpose, you've already started stepping into a rare and powerful state, creative control. Because focus is creative power. It is the ability to shape reality instead of just responding to it. Most people live reactively. They jump from task to task, idea to idea, emotion to emotion, and they wonder why nothing changes. But you're not wondering anymore. You're building. You're learning to sit with one task and dig deep. You're learning to shut the door, silence the noise, and move without interruption. And while that may seem small, it's everything. Because a focused mind becomes a magnet for outcomes. While others consume, you create. While others seek comfort, you seek progress. While others burn out from chasing, you attract by building with precision. You begin to shift from reaction to intention. You stop explaining yourself to people who won't get it. You stop apologizing for needing solitude. You stop making excuses for why your vision demands a different level of commitment. You realize that being focused doesn't make you rigid. It makes you clear. And clarity is a threat in a world that thrives on confusion. Because the person who knows exactly where they're going, who knows what to cut, what to ignore, what to double down on, becomes unshakable. So if you've started filtering your input, if you found joy in fewer tabs open, fewer conversations, fewer distractions, if you felt the peace that comes from being deeply locked into a mission, then you've already separated yourself from the majority. And this separation isn't punishment. It's preparation. Because every masterpiece ever created, every book, every movement, every invention, every empire was born through focused creation, not fragmented effort. You don't need more hours. You need more alignment within the hours you already have. And now, that's what you're claiming. So the next time your phone vibrates, the next time your mind wanders, the next time you're tempted to chase novelty instead of building depth, pause. Remember, every broken focus weakens your edge. Every protected focus sharpens it. And the sharper your focus, the more powerful your presence becomes. Because the world doesn't belong to the most talented. It belongs to the most intentional. And that's who you're becoming now. Not someone who needs motivation to stay on task, but someone who moves within a rhythm, sustained by a future too important to abandon. You've stopped chasing the fast lane. You've chosen the deep lane. And in that depth, you're not just producing results, you're forging identity. Lesson 4. You've started thinking long-term. There's a shift happening inside you. It's quiet, it's subtle, but it's undeniable. You're not making decisions based on emotion anymore. You're making decisions based on impact. Where others are looking for the fastest way out, you're building the longest-lasting way forward. Where most people live in short cycles, buy, react, panic, repeat. You've started asking deeper questions. What does this look like 5 years from now? Is this action building a foundation or just filling a gap? This is the pivot few ever make. Because thinking long-term is not just a mindset shift, it's an identity shift. It requires you to move from impulse to intention, from gratification to growth, from survival to strategy. And when you make that shift, the world around you doesn't understand. They'll ask why you're not going out as much, why you don't spend recklessly, why your decisions seem calculated. But they don't realize what you're doing. You're not pulling away from life. You're designing it. You've stopped reacting to the world. You've started building systems to shape it. This is the beginning of true power. Not the kind that comes from control, but from clarity. Clarity about who you are. Clarity about where you're headed. Clarity about what is and isn't worth your time, energy, or sacrifice. You've begun investing in assets, and not just financial ones. Assets of character, assets of skill, assets of value. You're no longer interested in looking rich. You're focused on becoming unshakable, and that requires time. Time to learn, time to build, time to grow without constantly starting over. You're no longer addicted to results that arrive overnight because you've seen what happens to those who build on sand. They fall the moment pressure hits. They break the moment circumstances shift. But not you. You're building with stone, with patience, with vision. You're no longer seduced by income without structure. You're building infrastructure that creates income on its own. You're done chasing flashy opportunities that burn fast and fade even faster. You've chosen sustainability. You've chosen resilience. And that means saying no to the easy route. No to the emotional decisions that cost you more later. No to the temptation to escape the discomfort of the build. Because you've felt it now. That strange sense of peace that comes from walking a longer path. That quiet confidence in knowing that what you're doing today will serve you tomorrow. That weight of maturity that pushes you to ask, not what feels good right now, but what will feel right 5 years from now. You've stepped out of the cycle most people never escape. They chase the high. You chase the harvest. And your life is starting to reflect it. Your habits are more intentional. Your environment is more refined. Your conversations are shifting toward growth. And your decisions no longer orbit around convenience. They orbit around your future self. You've stopped asking, what can I get today? You're now asking, what am I becoming with every choice I make? That shift, subtle as it may seem, is the foundation of everything lasting. Because wealth, real wealth, doesn't grow in the rush. It grows in the quiet, relentless momentum of someone who sees beyond the moment. So if your thoughts have started extending beyond the next paycheck, if you're thinking in seasons instead of seconds, if you're building with patience, stacking habits, and preparing your inner world for what your outer world has yet to reflect, then you're not just changing your mindset, you're rewriting your trajectory. You're becoming someone who doesn't fold under pressure, but forms under it. Someone who doesn't chase hype, but creates value. Someone who isn't swayed by emotion, but led by principle. This is how legacies begin. Not in loud declarations, but in quiet decisions that compound with time. Not in dramatic leaps, but in steady, focused steps taken with purpose. So when others tell you to live a little, smile. Because you know something they don't. You're not just living for now. You're building a life so solid that one day, you'll never have to look back and say, I wish I had. You'll be living the result of the sacrifices you made today. And that is wealth. Lesson 5. You see money differently now. Something changed. The way you look at money, it's not the same anymore. It used to control your emotions. It used to dictate your confidence, your decisions, your worth. It used to be this looming weight, this mysterious force you feared, craved, chased, and sometimes even hated. But now, you see it clearly, for what it is, and more importantly, for what it isn't. Money is not a savior. Money is not a master. Money is a tool, a servant, an amplifier. And that single realization shifts everything. Because most people never reach this point. They live their entire lives bound to money emotionally, terrified when it's gone, addicted when it's plenty, defined by the numbers in their account and the things they can afford to post. But not you. Not anymore. You've started to break free from that illusion. You've stopped assigning money the role of God in your life. You no longer look to it to solve problems that only character, discipline, or courage can fix. Now you see it for what it is, a mirror. Money reflects the structure you've built. It reflects your decisions, your strategy, your systems. It multiplies who you already are. If you're scattered, it vanishes. If you're reactive, it controls you. If you're emotionally immature, it destroys you. But if you're clear, if you're grounded, if you've done the work to build inner wealth, then money becomes what it was always meant to be. A force that serves your vision. You're not obsessed with it. You respect it. You respect what it can do. You respect what it requires. And you've stopped chasing it like a starving dog chases scraps. Because you now understand the law. Money flows to value. Not noise. Not need. Not desperation. Value. You've stopped trading hours for dollars. You've started creating leverage. Through systems, through knowledge, through skills that multiply without your presence. You've started asking, how can I make this scale? Instead of, how many hours will they pay me for? That shift is wealth consciousness. Because money isn't earned once. It's earned every time your value meets a problem in the marketplace. And now, you've begun thinking in solutions, not just survival. You're not praying for a raise. You're building something so useful, so reliable, so necessary, that compensation becomes a natural response. That's why the game feels different now. You're no longer impressed by people who spend loudly. You're impressed by those who move intelligently, who build, who manage, who create. You don't want to look rich. You want to be free. And money without wisdom is a trap. But money backed by intention, systems, discipline, and clarity, that's a weapon. That's a tool for impact. That's how empires are built and legacies are passed down. You've also learned that money, left unmanaged, will disappear. That it needs structure to grow. That if you cannot handle what you have, you will never hold more. And so now, you track, you budget, you audit. Not from scarcity, but from strength. Because the one who can be trusted with a little will be trusted with more. Money doesn't stay with the emotional. It doesn't obey the impulsive. It doesn't pity the needy. It flows to those who respect it. So if you've stopped fearing money, if you've started seeking ways to multiply value instead of just income, if you've begun using your mind, your creativity, your time as investments, rather than burning them on emotional survival, then wealth has already started forming within you. Because the poor mind complains and blames. The wealthy mind solves and executes. And you've made the shift. You no longer make financial decisions to impress others. You make them to protect your future. You no longer chase price tags. You chase possibilities. So if you're studying instead of shopping, if you're creating instead of consuming, if you're investing instead of escaping, then you're not behind. You're not losing. You're recalibrating. You're becoming someone the world can't ignore. This is how real wealth begins. Not with a windfall, not with luck, but with a new relationship. With money, with time, with yourself. And now that you've seen it this way, you can never go back. Because the person who sees money as a tool can never again be controlled by it. Lesson 6. You've stopped blaming, complaining, and waiting. At some point, quietly, without fanfare, you stopped pointing fingers. You stopped waiting for a sign. You stopped telling the same story about how everything went wrong. And in that silence, something powerful happened. You took ownership. Not because someone told you to. Not because a quote on your feed inspired you. But because you realized that every excuse, every complaint, every delay was keeping you poor. Not just financially, but mentally, emotionally, spiritually. You've outgrown the story that the world owes you something. You've stopped handing over your power to the past. You've stopped waiting for someone to give you permission to start. And now, because of that, you've become the answer. You are no longer waiting for the stars to align. You're no longer blaming your background, your upbringing, the system, or your situation. You've accepted what most people refuse to. It's not your fault, but it is your responsibility. Because the truth is, you didn't choose your starting point. But now, you're choosing what happens next. You've stopped believing that someone is coming to save you. Because now you understand, no one is. That doesn't make you cynical. It makes you powerful. Because the moment you stop waiting, you start moving. And the moment you stop blaming, you start building. And this isn't easy. It's far more comforting to believe your situation is someone else's fault. It's easier to complain about how things should be than to rise and create how things must be. It's easier to wait than to act, to analyze than to execute, to hope than to decide. But you're done with easy. You've tasted what it means to move from ownership. You've seen the strength that grows when you stop outsourcing your power. You've begun to act like the person who creates outcomes, not the one who reacts to circumstances. And that, right there, is the shift that separates those who rise from those who rot. Because those who complain stay stuck. They recycle the same conversations. They relive the same wounds. They remain victims of stories they refuse to outgrow. But you've stopped telling the story. You're writing a new one. You've stopped saying, "Why me?" You've started asking, "What now?" And more importantly, you've started answering. This is the point where transformation becomes real. Not because the pain goes away, but because you stop using it as a shield. Not because life becomes easier, but because you become stronger. Stronger than your excuses. Stronger than your fears. Stronger than the voice that told you it's not your fault and tried to keep you weak with it. Now you look in the mirror and say, "It starts with me." No more waiting. No more hoping someone sees your potential. No more stalling until it's perfect. Because you've realized something most never do. You don't need certainty. You need movement. You don't need approval. You need action. You don't need the past to change. You need to stop dragging it forward. And every time you act from that place, every time you create when you feel like complaining, every time you decide when you feel like doubting, every time you build when you feel like blaming, you evolve. You step further into the person you were born to be. Not the one who got stuck, but the one who climbed anyway. Not the one who had it easy, but the one who made it anyway. This is your power now, to choose, to act, to move, no matter how unfair, how broken, how uncertain things feel. You've stopped asking life to change first. You've changed, and now life must respond. So if you feel the urge to complain, to stall, to point outward, pause. And remember, you are the beginning. You are the shift. You are the sign you've been waiting for. And the moment you decided to stop blaming, complaining, and waiting, that's the moment wealth stopped being a dream and started becoming your reality. Lesson 7. You're no longer looking for signs. You've become the sign. You used to look outward for validation, for clues, for confirmation that you were on the right track. You asked for signs. You waited for someone to notice. You prayed for a moment, a message, a miracle that would say, "It's time. You're ready. You're enough." But not anymore, because something has changed inside of you. You've stopped asking. You've stopped waiting. You've stopped hoping for permission. Why? Because you finally realized you are the sign. Your actions, your decisions, your standards, your ability to keep moving forward even when no one's watching. That's the proof. You no longer need the universe to flash green lights in the sky to know your path is real. You don't need the people around you to cheer you on to believe you're growing. You've developed a deeper compass now, one that doesn't shake when things don't look like success yet. And that shift is not small. It's the moment you transition from seeker to creator, from dreamer to builder, from someone hoping for clarity to someone who walks in it. Because clarity doesn't always come before the decision. Sometimes it only comes after the leap. And you've already leapt. You've stopped asking if it's too late. You've stopped wondering if you're qualified. You've stopped waiting for the world to hand you a crown. Now, you wake up and crown yourself. Not with arrogance, with alignment. You no longer wonder, when will it happen? Because you've already become the type of person it happens to. You've built the habits. You've shaped the focus. You've sacrificed comfort. You've kept showing up, especially when no one noticed. And in doing so, you've built a version of yourself that doesn't chase approval. You radiate certainty. That's why people are starting to feel something different when they're around you. They may not be able to explain it, but your energy hits differently now. You speak with more weight. You move with more calm. You walk with more direction. Because you're no longer fueled by desperation. You're fueled by decision. You've stopped reacting to life. You've started dictating it. You're no longer asking, will this work? You're declaring, this will happen, because I will not stop until it does. You've become relentless, not loud, not reckless, unshakable. And that inner stillness, that calm, grounded certainty, that's what makes you a beacon. You no longer look to the outside world to tell you who you are. You've already decided. And because of that, the world is now forced to adjust. You're not here to prove. You're here to move. You're not here to get picked. You're here to build what they'll regret passing on. You've stopped waiting for the door to open. You've learned to build the door. And when there is no door, you become the wall breaker. Because people who become the sign aren't waiting for alignment. They are alignment. They walk into rooms and elevate them. They speak, and people listen. Not because they shout, but because they've earned every syllable through consistency. And here's the secret. The most powerful people in the world didn't get that way because someone chose them. They chose themselves, just like you're doing now. So if you've stopped asking when your time will come, if you've started acting like it's already here, if you've realized that no one is more qualified to fulfill your purpose than the version of you that's willing to show up and build anyway, then you've already crossed the threshold. You are no longer the student of possibility. You are the embodiment of it. You are the answer to the questions you used to cry out. You are the fulfillment of the vision you once doubted. You are the quiet storm that needs no announcement. And when others ask, how will I know when it's my time? You will be their answer. Because once you become the sign, you stop chasing power and start attracting everything that belongs to the version of you who rose up and refused to wait. Lesson 8. You've become obsessed with growth. There's a shift that happens, subtle at first, but impossible to ignore once it takes hold. You stop craving comfort. You stop chasing distractions. You stop feeding the version of yourself that just wants to feel better. And instead, you begin to crave something much more powerful. Growth. Not surface-level improvement. Not motivation posters and temporary highs. We're talking about the kind of growth that rewires you, that rebuilds you, that burns away who you were and forges who you're meant to become. You've entered that phase now. You read differently, not to be entertained, but to become equipped. You listen differently, not to react, but to absorb wisdom. You ask questions, not to impress, but to understand. You've traded noise for nourishment. You've replaced scrolling with studying. You've replaced gossip with guidance. You're not just interested in growth anymore. You're obsessed with it. You've realized that if you want to build a life most people never experience, you have to think, act, move, and grow in ways most people never will. And that means leaving behind the shallow. You've stopped caring about being the smartest person in the room. You just want to be in rooms where growth is required. You've stopped needing to be right. You want to be effective. You've stopped pretending you know it all. You'd rather learn than protect your pride. This obsession has changed the way you see everything. The conversations you entertain, the books you pick up, the content you consume, the people you allow into your space. Because you now understand. Your environment is either fertilizing your growth or killing it. And so, You've become ruthless about protecting it. You seek mentors instead of approval. You surround yourself with people who stretch your thinking, not just validate your emotions. You no longer bond over weakness. You bond over vision. This is what most don't understand. Growth is not just about improvement. It's about evolution. It's about shedding the old, ruthlessly, relentlessly, unapologetically. You don't cling to outdated beliefs anymore. You outgrow them. You don't defend the identity that once kept you safe. You replace it with the one that will carry you forward. And yes, it's uncomfortable. Because growth requires discomfort. It requires tension. It requires you to look at your flaws, your habits, your excuses, not with shame, but with discipline. You no longer hide from the parts of yourself that need work. You face them head on. And that self-honesty, that's the root of transformation. You've stopped performing. You've stopped waiting to be noticed. You've stopped needing validation to keep going. You're focused on one thing: becoming undeniable. Through action, through execution, through daily disciplines that most people will never commit to. And even when your growth feels invisible, even when no one's clapping for you, even when your results haven't caught up to your effort, you keep going. Because you've learned that real growth compounds in silence. It happens in private, in the reps no one sees, in the decisions that seem small but carry weight, in the moments you choose to be better, not for applause, but for alignment. And that alignment, that internal agreement with who you're becoming, that's what gives you the kind of power that cannot be bought, borrowed, or faked. It's the power of transformation. Not just learning, but applying. Not just changing your habits, but changing your identity. You're not becoming someone new. You're becoming someone true. So if you've started looking at every situation as a lesson, if you've stopped running from pain and started extracting fuel from it, if you've begun to treat growth not as a hobby, but as a non-negotiable way of life, then you've already stepped into the rarest kind of wealth, mastery of self. Because when you're obsessed with growth, everything else begins to follow. Money, purpose, power, clarity, impact. They're all byproducts of someone who refuses to stay small. So keep going, keep expanding, keep building depth over noise, keep stretching yourself, mentally, emotionally, spiritually. Because this isn't just self-improvement, this is self-reinvention. And the person you're becoming, they're not just growing, they're becoming unstoppable. You didn't stumble into this. You didn't get here by accident. Every feeling of restlessness, every moment of silence, every whisper of discomfort with the life you used to tolerate, it's all been part of a greater transformation. You're not losing your mind. You're shedding your limits. This is what evolution looks like. You felt it when mediocrity started to choke you. When the routine you used to settle for suddenly felt like prison. That was the first sign. When you could no longer pretend to be okay with average. Not because someone told you to rise, but because your soul demanded it. Then, you started seeing time differently. You stopped wasting hours like they were infinite. You began to guard your minutes like treasure, because you understood something others still don't. Time is not just how you spend your life. Time is your life. You began protecting your attention, sharpening your focus, refusing to allow yourself to be pulled in every direction by noise, by chaos, by distraction. Because you've seen what a focused mind can build. And more importantly, what a scattered one destroys. You stopped thinking in days. You started thinking in decades. You began laying bricks instead of chasing shortcuts. You traded dopamine hits for long-term clarity. You began to ask, not how does this feel right now, but what will this create 5 years from now? And with that shift, money changed, too. You no longer worship it. You don't fear it. You don't chase it like it's the prize. You now know it's just a mirror, an amplifier, a servant, and it serves the one who creates value, structure, and vision. So you stopped blaming, stopped complaining, stopped waiting. You stopped living like someone on the sidelines, waiting for a green light from the universe. You finally said, "It starts with me." And you meant it. You stopped looking for signs, and you became one. A living, breathing confirmation of what happens when someone refuses to shrink, refuses to stall, and decides to move forward. Without applause, without permission, without perfect conditions. You've become obsessed now, but not with success, with growth. Not for vanity, but for alignment. Because you've realized nothing will change until you do. And you're changing. Faster than you thought. Deeper than you expected. You're not just improving, you're being forged. Every decision, every no to the old self, every yes to the discomfort of expansion, every moment of solitude, every page read, every habit shifted, every dollar tracked, every hour reclaimed, every conversation avoided to protect your peace. It's all proof. You're not on the edge of transformation. You're in the thick of it. And if no one told you yet, let me say it clearly. You're not the same. You're not behind. You're not lost. You're walking the rarest path there is. The path of complete internal alignment. A path that leads to wealth. Not just in bank accounts, but in clarity, in peace, in power, in the unshakable identity of someone who knows exactly who they're becoming. So keep walking, keep building, keep choosing the harder path, the higher path. You don't need signs anymore. You are the evidence. And the world has already started to take notice.